Hello there, listening squirrels. I'm so sorry I didn't get to read last night. I just didn't get it done. Here we are in the midst of whatever chapter the title says. I was going on to Market Basing, said Tuppence. Perhaps you can tell me a nice, quiet hotel to stay there? Well, I expect you'll find it a little disappointing. It's just a market town, you know. It doesn't cater at all for the motoring trade. The Blue Dragon is a 2-star, but really I don't think these stars mean anything at all sometimes. I think you'd find the Lamb better, quieter, you know. Are you staying there for long? Oh, no, said Tuppence. Just a day or two while I'm looking round the neighborhood. Not very much to see, I'm afraid. No interesting antiquities or anything like that. We're purely a rural and agricultural district, said the vicar. But peaceful, you know, very peaceful. As I told you, some interesting wildflowers. Ah, yes, said Tuppence. I've heard that, and I'm anxious to collect a few specimens. In the intervals of doing a little mild house hunting, she added. Oh dear, how interesting, said Miss Bly. Are you thinking of settling in this neighborhood? Well, excuse me. My husband and I haven't decided very definitely on any one neighborhood in particular, said Tuppence, and we're in no hurry. He won't be retiring for another 18 months. But it's always as well, I think, to look about. Personally, what I prefer to do is to stay in one neighborhood for 4 or 5 days, get a list of likely small properties and drive about to see them. Coming down for one day from London to see one particular house is very tiring, I find. Oh, yes, you've got your car here, have you? Yes, said Tuppence. I shall have to go to a house agent in Market Basing tomorrow morning. There's nowhere, I suppose, to stay in the village here, is there? Of course there's Mrs. Copley, said Miss Bly. She takes people in the summer, you know, summer visitors. She's beautifully clean, all her rooms are. Of course she only does bed and breakfast, perhaps a light meal in the evening, but I don't think she takes anyone in much before August. Or July at the earliest. Perhaps I could go and see her and find out, said Tuppence. She's a very worthy woman, said the vicar. Her tongue wags a good deal, he added. She never stops talking, not for a single minute. A lot of gossip and chattering is always going on in these small villages, said Miss Bly. I think it would be a very good idea if I helped Mrs. Beresford. I could take her along to Mrs. Copley and just see what chances there are. That would be very kind of you, said Tuppence. Then we'll be off, said Miss Bly briskly. Goodbye, vicar. Still on your quest? A sad task, and so unlikely to meet with success. I really think it was a most unreasonable request to make. Tuppence said goodbye to the vicar and said she'd be glad to help him if she could. I could easily spend an hour or two looking at the various gravestones. I've got very good eyesight for my age. It's just the name Waters you're looking for? Not really, said the vicar. It's the age that matters, I think. A child of perhaps 7 it would be, a girl. Major Waters thinks that his wife might have changed her name, and that probably the child might be known by the name she had taken, and as he doesn't know what the name is, it makes it all very difficult. The whole thing's impossible so far as I can see, said Miss Bly. You ought never to have said you would do such a thing, vicar. It's monstrous suggesting anything of the kind. The poor fellow seems very upset, said the vicar. A sad history altogether, so far as I can make out. But I mustn't keep you. Tuppence thought to herself as she was shepherded by Miss Bly that no matter what the reputation of Mrs. Copley for talking, she could hardly talk more than Miss Bly did. A stream of pronouncements, both rapid and dictatorial, poured from her lips. Mrs. Copley's cottage proved to be a pleasant and roomy one, set back from the village street, with a neat garden of flowers in front, a whitened doorstep, and a brass handle well polished. Mrs. Copley herself seemed to Tuppence like a character straight out of the pages of Dickens. She was very small and very round, so that she came rolling towards you rather like a rubber ball. She had bright twinkling eyes, blonde hair rolled up in sausage curls on her head, and an air of tremendous vigor. After displaying a little doubt to begin with, "Well, I don't usually, No, my husband and I say summer visitors, that's different. Everyone that if they can nowadays, and I have to, I'm sure, but not this, and have to, I'm sure. But not this time of year so much we don't, not until July. However, if it's just for a few days, and the lady wouldn't mind things being a bit rough, perhaps." Tuppence said she didn't mind things being rough, and Mrs. Copley, having surveyed her with close attention, whilst not stopping her flow of conversation, said perhaps the lady would like to come up and see the room, and then things might be arranged. At that point, Miss Bly tore herself away with some regret, because she had not so far been able to extract all the information she wanted from Tuppence as to where she came from, what her husband did, how old she was, if they had any children, and other matters of interest. But it appeared that she had a meeting at her house over which she was going to preside, and I was terrified at the risk that someone else might seize that coveted post. "You'll be quite all right with Mrs. Copley," she assured Tuppence. "She'll look after you, I'm sure. Now, what about your car?" "Oh, I'll fetch it presently," said Tuppence. "Mrs. Copley will tell me where I had better put it. I can leave it outside here, really, because it isn't a very narrow street, is it?" "Oh, my husband can do better than that for you," said Mrs. Copley. He'll put it in the field for you, just round the side lane here, and it'll be quite all right there. There's a shed he can drive it into." Things were arranged amicably on that basis, and Miss Bly hurried away to her appointment. The question of an evening meal was next raised. Tuppence asked if there was a pub in the village. We have nothing as a lady could go to," said Miss Copley, "but if you'd be satisfied with a couple of eggs and a slice of ham and maybe some bread and homemade jam." Tuppence said that would be splendid. Her room was small. Sorry. Sinus drainage. Seems like it's all the time. Said that would be splendid. Her room was small but cheerful and pleasant, with a rosebud wallpaper and a comfortable looking bed and a general air of spotless cleanliness. "Yes, it's a nice wallpaper, miss," said Miss Copley, who seemed determined to accord Tuppence. Hang on. Okay. Nice wallpaper, who seemed determined to accord Tuppence single status. Chose it, we did, so that any newly married couple should come here on honeymoon. Romantic, if you know what I mean. Tuppence agreed that romance was a very desirable thing. They haven't got so much to spend nowadays, newly marrieds, not what they used to. Most of them, you see, are saving for a house, or are making down payments already, or they've got to buy some furniture on the hire purchase, HIRE. And it doesn't leave anything over for having a posh honeymoon or anything of that kind. They're careful, you know, most of the young folk. They don't go bashing all their money. She clattered downstairs again, talking briskly as she went. Tuppence lay down on the bed to have half an hour's sleep. After a somewhat tiring day, she had, however, great hopes of Mrs. Copley, and felt that once thoroughly rested herself, she would be able to lead the conversation to the most fruitful subjects possible. She would hear, she was sure, all about the house by the bridge. She had lived there. Hang on. All about the house by the bridge. Who had lived there, who had been of evil or good repute in the neighborhood, what scandals there were, and other such likely topics. She was more convinced of this than ever when she had been introduced to Mr. Copley, a man who barely opened his mouth. His conversation was mostly made up of amiable grunts, usually signifying an affirmative, sometimes in more muted tones a disagreement. He was content, so far as Tuppence could see, to let his wife talk. He himself more or less abstracted his attention, part of the time busy with his plans for the day, which appeared to be market day. As far as Tuppence was concerned, nothing could have turned out better. It could have been distinguished by a slogan: "You want information? We have it." Mrs. Copley was as good as a wireless set or television. You had only to turn the button and words poured out, unaccompanied by gestures and lots of facial expressions. Not only was her figure like a child's rubber ball, but her face also had been made of India rubber. The various people she was talking about almost came alive in caricature before Tuppence's eyes. Hang on. Okay. Doggone. Sorry. Lord, y'all, I'm sleepy. Falling asleep on you. I've lost my doggone place. Dang it, I can't find it. There we go. I'm sorry about that. No, I don't remember any Lancasters in these parts. Lancaster. Yeah, that's right. No, it wasn't. Sorry. Tuppence ate bacon and eggs and had slices of thick bread and butter, and praised the blackberry jelly, homemade, her favorite kind. she truthfully announced, and did her best to absorb the flood of information so that she could write notes down in her notebook later. A whole panorama of the past in this country district seemed to be spread out before her. There was no chronological sequence, which occasionally made things difficult. Mrs. Copley jumped from 15 years ago to 2 years ago to last month, and then back to somewhere in the 20s. Lordy. All this would want a lot of sorting out, and Tuppence wondered whether in the end she would get anything. The first button she had pressed had not given her any result. That was a mention of Mrs. Lancaster. "I think she came from hereabout," said Tuppence, allowing a good deal of vagueness to appear in her voice. "She had a picture, a very nice picture, done by an artist who I believe was known down here." "Who did you say now? A Mrs. Lancaster?" "No, now here we go. No, I don't remember any Lancasters in these parts. Lancaster. A gentleman had a car accident, I remember. No, it was the car I'm thinking of. A Lancaster, that was. No, Mrs. Lancaster. It wouldn't be Miss Bolting, would it? She'd be about 70 now, I think. She might have married a Mr. Lancaster. She might have married. She went away and traveled abroad, and I do hear she married someone. The picture she gave my aunt was by... was by Mr. Boscobel, I think the name was," said Tuppence. "What a lovely jelly. I don't put no apple in it either, like most people do. Makes it gel better, they say, but it takes all the flavor out." "Yes," said Tuppence, "I quite agree with you, it does." "Who did you say now? It began with a B, but I didn't quite catch it." Boscobel, I think." "Oh, I remember Mr. Boscawen well. Let's see now. That must have been 15 years ago. It was at least that. He came riding down here. He came several years running, he did. He liked the place, actually rented a cottage, one of the Farmer Hart's cottages it was, that he kept for his laborer. But they built a new one, they did, the council, 4 new cottages specially for laborers. Regular artist, Mr. B was, said Mrs. Copley. Funny kind of coat he used to wear. Sort of velvet or corduroy. It used to have holes in the elbows, and he wore green and yellow shirts, he did. Oh, very colorful he was. I liked his pictures, I did. He had a showing of them one year. Wait a minute. Showing them one year. Round about Christmas time it was, I think. No, of course not. It must have been in the summer. He wasn't here in the winter. Yes, very nice. Nothing exciting, if you know what I mean. Just a house with a couple of trees, or two cows looking over a fence, but all nice and quiet and pretty colors. Not like some of these young chaps nowadays. Do you have a lot of artists down here? Not really. Oh, no, not to speak of. 1 or 2 ladies come down in the summer and do sketching sometimes, but I don't think much of them. We had a young fellow a year ago, called himself an artist. Didn't shave properly. I can't say I liked any of his pictures much. Funny colors all swirled round anyhow. Nothing you could recognize a bit. Sold a lot of his pictures, he did, at that, and they weren't cheap, mind you. Ought to have been 5 pounds, said Mr. Copley, entering the conversation for the first time. So suddenly Tuppence jumped. What my husband thinks is, said Miss Copley. He thinks. Oh, shoot. Jumped again. I must stop there, y'all. I keep losing my doggone place. And my eyes are closing up. I'm so sorry, y'all. I hope what I did read made sense. I think I found it, so I bookmark it. Sorry for that pause. I took a little nap. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly. Bye-bye.